The FBI has 10,000 hours of footage, cell tower records, and license plate data from the night Nancy Guthrie was taken and has made zero public statements about the car. Zero.
At first, the Nancy Guthrie case looked like another late-night mystery. But then, investigators noticed something strange in the timeline. A pacemaker disconnecting at 2:28 a.m., a car passing a camera minutes later, and a chain of evidence that keeps pointing back to two familiar names: Tommaso Cioni and Dominic Evans. But before we start, subscribe to T-Rex so you don't miss anything from me. Let's get into it. At first glance, the timeline looks ordinary, just numbers on a clock, just another quiet night in Tucson. But investigators know something the public often forgets. Numbers don't lie, and in the Nancy Guthrie case, the numbers are screaming. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker application suddenly disconnected from her phone. That detail alone sent investigators leaning forward in their chairs, because a pacemaker app doesn't randomly disconnect in the middle of the night for fun. That signal usually drops for one of three reasons: the phone moves out of range, the device is manually disabled, or the person wearing the pacemaker is physically moved. Translation? At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie was likely in motion. Then comes the second number, 2:36 a.m. A Ring camera sitting quietly on Camino Royale, about 2.5 miles from Nancy's home, captured a vehicle driving through the darkness just 8 minutes after the pacemaker disconnect. 8 minutes. And here's where the math becomes unsettling. Driving the back road route between Nancy's home and that camera location takes roughly 6 minutes if you avoid the larger intersections. That's not speculation either. Journalists actually drove the route themselves. 6 minutes on a quiet road at 2:30 in the morning. So do the math. 2:28 plus 6 minutes equals 2:34 a.m. The car appears 2 minutes later. 2 minutes isn't a mistake. 2 minutes is hesitation. 2 minutes is someone sitting at the end of a residential street checking mirrors, adjusting a mask, making sure the neighborhood is asleep before pulling onto the road. Investigators call this a behavioral artifact, a tiny piece of human behavior that quietly reveals intention, not chaos, not panic, planning. And suddenly the night of February 1st stops looking random. It starts looking timed, measured, executed. And somewhere in that 6-minute corridor between a disconnected pacemaker and a camera catching a passing car, Nancy Guthrie vanished into the dark. The vehicle itself almost feels like a joke. Not a black van, not a suspicious cargo truck, not some movie villain SUV with tinted windows and a rumbling engine. No. Investigators believe the car captured that night was something far less dramatic. A Kia Soul, yes. The small, boxy crossover that normally transports groceries, gym bags, and maybe an exhausted golden retriever named Cooper. And that's exactly why it matters. Because the perfect getaway car isn't flashy. The perfect getaway car is forgettable. A Kia Soul blends into traffic like background noise. Neighbors don't stare at it. Security cameras barely notice it. It's the vehicular equivalent of beige wallpaper, which raises a chilling possibility the vehicle may not have been chosen randomly. It may have been chosen because it disappears. Investigators reviewing the footage notice something else about the silhouette. The car appears to have space in the rear cargo area, enough room if the back seats were folded down. Now combine that with another eerie detail from the investigation. The figure seen approaching Nancy Guthrie's home appeared to carry a backpack. Former FBI analysts suggested the bag could contain what they described as a transport kit: zip ties, tape, restraints, tools not for stealing televisions or jewelry, tools for moving a person. Suddenly, the Kia Soul stops being a harmless grocery getter. It becomes something else entirely, a quiet container moving through sleeping neighborhoods while the city dreams. And here's the darker twist. That car didn't drive randomly through Tucson. It traveled a corridor that branches into 3 very specific directions: toward the city center, toward the suburbs where certain individuals live, or out into the empty desert. 3 directions, 3 possibilities. And investigators already know which way the car went. They just haven't told the public. The route itself might be the most revealing piece of the puzzle. Camino Royale feeds into East River Road, a quiet artery slicing across the northern edge of Tucson. In daylight, it's just another suburban connector road. But at 2:36 a.m., it becomes something different entirely, a crossroads. From that point, a driver can disappear in 3 directions. South leads toward the city, and eventually Interstate 19, a highway that stretches all the way toward the Mexican border, 60 miles of roads separating Tucson from Rio Rico and beyond. West runs through residential neighborhoods toward the part of Tucson where Dominic Evans lives and works. North climbs toward Oro Valley, the quiet suburb where Tommaso Cioni teaches biology and maintains a home with Annie Guthrie. And east? East is where the lights thin out. Open desert, trailheads, dry washes, miles of terrain where search helicopters can fly overhead and still miss what's hidden beneath the brush. Investigators haven't revealed which direction the car took, and that silence is deafening because law enforcement only hides route information for 2 reasons. Either they don't want the driver to realize they've been seen, or they already know exactly who the driver is. Meanwhile, the FBI reportedly possesses more than 10,000 hours of surveillance footage from cameras scattered across Tucson. Traffic cams, ring doorbells, license plate readers, a digital breadcrumb trail stretching across the city. Somewhere inside that mountain of footage is a sequence of frames showing the same vehicle again and again and again, turning, stopping, passing another camera, each frame tightening the circle, each frame shrinking the mystery. And eventually, those cameras will do what cameras always do in modern investigations. They will lead investigators from a shadowy car in the dark straight to a name on a registration record. Long before the car slipped through the dark at 2:36 a.m., another camera captured something far more unsettling, a figure standing at Nancy Guthrie's front door. Investigators later reconstructed the scene with eerie precision. The FBI erected a white forensic tent over the entrance of the house. Agents recreated the lighting conditions from that night. Infrared cameras rolled while someone dressed in similar clothing repeated the movements seen in the footage. Why all the theater? Because investigators weren't looking for a face. The person in the footage wore a mask. They were looking for measurements, height, posture, build, and when the analysis was finished, the result was surprisingly specific. The individual approaching Nancy Guthrie's door measured somewhere between 5'9" and 5'10". That number matters more than it sounds, because it quietly eliminates certain people from being the figure on the porch. Investigative journalists comparing photos estimate Tommaso Cioni stands close to 6 feet tall. That extra height creates a problem for the theory that he was the masked individual. But here's where the story refuses to simplify. Even if he wasn't the person at the door, he was still the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. Just 4 hours earlier at 9:48 p.m., he dropped her off at her home. The garage door opened at 9:50. He waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Then, the night unfolded. 3 hours and 57 minutes later, someone interfered with the doorbell camera. A masked figure appeared, and Nancy Guthrie vanished. 38 days have passed since that night, and during that time, something else has stood out to investigators and analysts alike: silence. While members of the Guthrie family have spoken publicly, pleaded for information, and appeared in emotional videos, Tommaso Cioni has said nothing. Not one statement, not one interview. 38 days of quiet in the middle of a national investigation. And silence, in a case like this, is rarely accidental. If Tommaso Cioni forms one side of the investigative spotlight, the other side falls on a man named Dominic Evans. His name surfaced publicly on February 4th when court records began circulating online. Felony, burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement. A Dewey. None of those charges connect him directly to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, but they paint a picture investigators never ignore: a documented history of unlawful entry into buildings, which suddenly makes the doorbell footage more interesting, because the masked individual didn't appear confused about the property layout. They moved through the gate with calm familiarity, Not like a stranger fumbling through the dark, like someone who knew the geometry of the house. Evans gave one interview to the New York Times, just one. In it, he explained that he had met Nancy Guthrie exactly once at an Easter gathering back in 2011. According to him, investigators spoke with him for about 40 minutes early in the case and never contacted him again. He also offered an alibi, home with his wife and children. His wife confirmed it. Phone records reportedly support it. On paper, that should end the speculation. Except for one detail investigators can't ignore. Dominic Evans and Tommaso Cioni have been friends for 19 years. They met in 2007 through a Craigslist ad. They formed a band together. They rehearsed, traveled, and maintained a long-running friendship that spanned nearly 2 decades. For all 19 of those years, Cioni was already married to Annie Guthrie, which means every conversation between the two men happened in the background of that family connection. Addresses get mentioned casually, security routines slip into conversation, personal details about relatives surface without anyone realizing their significance. Investigators don't just ask who met Nancy Guthrie, they ask who knew about her life. And 19 years of friendship can quietly pass along a lot of information. While the public debates cars and timelines, the real clock in this investigation is ticking inside a laboratory because 2 separate Dina profiles have already entered the evidence chain. The first came from a black glove discovered roughly 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. That sample was submitted to CODIS, the national Dina database used by law enforcement. No match, at least not yet. But the second sample may prove far more important. Investigators recovered biological material inside the home itself. The Dina appears to be a mixed profile, meaning genetic material from more than one person is present. Forensic labs are currently separating the contributors, a process that can take time but eventually produces individual profiles. And once those profiles are isolated, the real power of modern forensics begins. Investigative genetic genealogy. It's the same technique that solved the Golden State Killer case. Even if the suspect's Dina isn't in a criminal database, investigators can upload the genetic markers into genealogy platforms and begin building a family tree. They don't need the suspect. They only need one distant relative who submitted a Dina test to a genealogy website years ago. From there, analysts work backward through cousins, second cousins, great uncles, and family branches until the tree narrows to a single person, one name, one address. One life that suddenly explains why that Dina appeared at a crime scene. And here's the uncomfortable truth investigators know. The odds that both contributors to that Dina sample have 0 relatives in genealogy databases are incredibly small, which means somewhere in a lab right now, technicians are quietly building a genetic map, piece by piece, branch by branch, until the distance between a glove on a roadside, a car at 2:36 a.m., and a human name collapses into the same answer. When that moment comes, the silence surrounding this case won't matter anymore, because evidence doesn't argue, evidence identifies. And that's the unsettling truth hanging over the Nancy Guthrie investigation right now. The car, the timeline, the the decades-long friendship, every thread keeps looping back into the same tightening circle. The only question left is which piece of evidence speaks first. Because when it does, this entire mystery could collapse overnight. Subscribe and stay tuned, because the next development in this case might change everything.